Hello, my darlings. Madam Raven here, with a wonderful fairy tale for you. Again by the very talented Gelfwyn. It was going to be worth it, he thought, as he pushed yet another damn branch out of the way. Virgin forest would be part of the selling point, but at the moment he would give anything for a nice, level sidewalk. Another root wrapped around his ankle and threatened to send him face first into another pile of saber-toothed vines. He was doing everyone a favor getting this mess tamed. The river moved lazily past. There, just opposite that willow grove, would be the first deck overlook. Piers out into the bend would allow him to offer the lure of fishing and luxury. Now, over there, a boathouse. Canoes, floats. Now, over there, a boathouse, canoes, floats. People for some reason loved playing in filthy rivers. Up there, a proper pool and some discreet hot tubs for newlyweds to giggle in, but not so discreet that they need to sanitize the hot tubs hourly. The slope would be for the resort, river views, valley views, mountain views, something for everyone. Tame the jungle, put in gardens, terraces. He was certain that it could become a wedding destination with the right sales team behind it. Hey, getting out into nature was the latest trend, but wanting to do it with the least amount of inconvenience was a given when dealing with the crowd he wanted to reach. Rich and spoiled. What was it they called it? Glamping? A flutter of cloth caught his eye. There among the curtain of the branches moved a woman in a dress, the exact color of the leaves. One eyebrow cocked upward as he tried to imagine just exactly how a woman in a dress had managed the hellish climb through the forest to get to the willows. Had to be a decent path over there. He stared in annoyance at the river that barred his path. The bridge was back at the highway. By the time he walked down and then back up, it would be nearly nightfall and the girl would be gone. He watched as she turned and went back into hiding among the willow leaves. Long, palest gold hair that caught for a moment on the branches and then trailed away. He wondered what she looked like. Tomorrow he would walk up that side of the river. Perhaps he could find whatever trail she'd used. Had to be much nicer than walking in the damn woods. He cursed again as pine cones dropped onto his head. Somewhere above the branches shifted and moved tree rats. Another annoyance he'd be glad to see run off. Hunting. That could be marketed. Shoot it, we cook it. He glanced one last time at the willow grove. Who was she? There was no trail he could find. Just another hike through things that tore at him, tripped him, and slapped him in the face. He found himself in the small clearing that surrounded the willow grove and nodded. Here were some large boulders, almost in a circle. Somewhat flat area. Have a nice footbridge, rustic logs. Lead over here could have another garden area, another wedding location. River, the valley, the willows. Plenty of room for a tent. Maybe cut down the trees over there for a larger clearing area. The willow branches moved and swayed, but there was no breeze. Could she have come back? He approached slowly. Last thing he needed to do was surprise some foul-tempered creature. Pushing aside the curtain, he was almost pleased at the tent-like room beneath the willow. You would need to have some benches added, a private place for lovers, and over there, he blinked at her. Perfect. Utterly perfect. The ivory pale skin, the delicate heart-shaped face framed by the pale gold hair, the leaf-green eyes large and clear. She seemed to study him as he walked slowly to her. Tall, slender, he had never believed in love at first sight. However, lust was very much real, and he shifted uncomfortably. Another dress, clinging to the sweet curves of her body, then floating like the willow branches around her legs. The gray-brown color almost matched the bark of the tree behind her. Even the pattern of it reminded him of bark. You are perfect. She blushed and laughed. He was angry at himself. That was not what he had wanted to say. But her laughter made his body tighten and fire flow through his body. Never had he heard such a lovely sound. He wanted to hear her sigh and moan, say his name. He wanted her more than any woman he had ever met. I mean, hello. You seem a bit far off the normal paths.
Oh, I'm at home in these woods. I've been here as long as I can remember.
Her voice was soothing. He normally wasn't one to stand the chatter of women. Her, she could read a phone book to him and he would love it. How did you get up here? That hike is a nightmare. A shake of her hair sent it dancing softly.
I do not know what you're talking about.
I'm the one that's buying this land. Made a deal with the county when I found out it's actually not part of the park officially. Going to put in a resort and make this place worth something.
It is already worth something to those who know the value of it.
He was amazed at the eyes. Every shade of green was faceted within them. No browns or murky tones. Perfect eyes. Perfect, flawless face. Perfect, rose-pink lips. I think I want you for my wife, as silly as that might sound.
I cannot be your wife, nor any man's wife.
He smiled. No, you will be mine. I always get what I want.
Not this time.
She stepped behind the tree just out of sight. He was up for a chase and stepped after her. Nothing. The branches just as thick on this side were perfectly still. The water showed no ripples. He looked up at just the tree above. Where the hell had she gone? He had other things to do as he continued the process to acquire the land. Money was always useful to grease the right wheels. But he swore someone was trying to put a stop to his purchase. Paperwork kept vanishing. People didn't call back. Phone numbers would be wrong. He wanted to go back up to the Willow Grove. This time he would catch her. Drag her back if he had to. This time he would get her name. It took a week before he could return to the grove. She was in another green dress, or maybe the one from the first day. She was again beneath the willow, bare feet trailing in the water. Name? He ordered breathlessly.
Dirt, river, water, stone.
She motioned to or picked up each as she named it. A faint smile sparkled in her eyes. No, damn it, your name. A shrug, and she let a handful of dried leaves drift into the river valley.
Sally.
He frowned. A horridly common name. It did not fit her. Well, names could be changed. Sophia. He would call her Sophia. Name changes were just paperwork, yes? His wife, Sophia. That sounded perfect. As elegant and lovely as she was, his peers would be envious at the beauty he had managed to catch. Without buying her from some third-rate country, he moved towards her as she stood up and shot the last of the debris from her hands, a habit he would have to break once her hands were manicured. Again she walked out of sight for a moment. Her wet footprints led to the tree trunk, then vanished. He went home and got drunk. Something was not adding up here. Something tickled his mind, half remembered but just out of reach. His grandmother, crazy old broad, always reading useless folk tales to him. The next day he started researching. He had to be crazy for even considering any of this. But one of the first things that made it real was an Irish word for willow. Sally, pronounced as Sally. Selkies and sea maids. That was the tales his grandmother had told him. Magical beauties one could capture if one took the binding from them. A fey bride. No, not bride. No one would have a record she existed. His toy for the rest of his life. Unable to escape him. Unable to refuse him. The tree was what bound her to the land. What kept her from being claimed. All he had to do was chop down the tree. The tree was old, but willow was a softwood. Chainsaw? No, something about iron. So an iron axe. He could do it. No way he was going to allow anyone else to steal the girl. He brought soft rope, an iron axe, a heavy tarp on the next hellish hike through the forest. For once, not being tripped or slapped in the face. He could almost think the trees were avoiding the axe. Soon many of them would feel the chainsaw's bite, he thought smugly. But first to claim the real, live fairy for his own. She wasn't immediately in sight as he pushed the branches aside. Rather, she was in a fork of the tree above him.
Won't work,
she half smirked at him. Oh, it will work. And when I have you home, I will teach you to respect me. I will never be carried from this forest alive. He didn't say a word, just struck maliciously out at the tree. It felt good to attack it, to see chunks of it ripped out. The wood was the color of her hair, he realized. Another gleeful laugh, and he lashed out again and again at the annoyances coming to his mind. This was for that clerk that couldn't keep track of his papers. This for the judge, more interested in sleeping than signing the order. This for that little stuck-up bitch of a realtor. Crack! The tree leaned and then fell with a soft thud. He dropped the axe and leapt up onto the fallen trunk, finding her tangled in the branches unconscious. Must have hit her head, or shock. It didn't matter as he ran his hand over her body, now his. Quickly tying her hands and feet, he wrapped her tight in the tarp and headed back down the mountain to his waiting car. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, never wiggled or struggled. He walked out to the road, heading for the small gravel parking lot on the other side, stopping in confusion at the 2 police cars, the sudden wail of a siren, the orders to drop to his knees. Why did they have their guns trained on him? She was ripped from his arms as he protested. A heavy fist struck his jaw as a booted foot hit him in the back, knocking him to the ground. Laying there furiously ranting about suing them into poverty, he watched them unroll the tarp. Blood. Red blood ran from the tarp. Then her head rolled out, coming to rest a foot from his own face, the dead green eyes staring into his unbelieving. The police were cursing. A foot impacted his ribs with a breath-stealing slam. You monster! They had it all wrong. They had to see she wasn't human, he babbled as they struck out at him, as he resisted arrest. Finally he knew it was true. He wouldn't take her from the forest. He was going to die here on this cracked asphalt. His legacy was to be the axe murderer, caught in the act. They walked in near silence. Most carried lanterns. At the lead were 3 people. 2 carried infants. One babbled softly in her parents' arms. The other was in a basket, silent and staring at the world, with willow leaf green eyes. The leader held a small casket in his cupped hands, the horned headdress of a druid making him stand out. As they walked, people, youths, adults, Elders, men, women, appeared seemingly from behind trees at random and watched. As they neared the glade with the standing stones and the fallen willow, 2 more joined them. Native Americans. 1 elder who watched with ancient eyes, 1 younger, medicine man and his apprentice. They bowed heads and took a place beside the leader. The group circled around the stones as the medicine man and the leader with the casket stepped into the middle. Voices lifted into a chant. 2 were reciting a song in a native dialect. The rest sang in Gaelic. No one seemed to mind the difference. In fact, the 2 were blending into a soaring melody. The 2 infants were brought forward and laid side by side in the soft grass. Something gleamed and glittered like fireflies about the 2 then, flickering off to a spot down near the river from the fallen tree. The group moved to form a path between the stones and the river location. Lanterns held aloft. 1 man stepped forward smiling and gathered the quiet child from the basket. He cradled her against his uniform, smiling as her hand grabbed his badge. The medicine man's apprentice moved to help with digging a hole where the false fireflies swarmed. Within the soft cradle of earth they laid the infant. The leader opened the casket and withdrew what looked like a dried-out piece of meat and laid it beside the child. The thing swelled and glistened, turning bright red and bloody as it started to pulse in a slow heartbeat. Each member of the group, from youngest to oldest, came forward, adding a handful of earth to refill the cradle. The infant squealed and kicked her tiny legs as the dirt tickled over her. The other infant, still laying within the stone circle, also began squealing and flailing tiny arms. A woman smiled and brushed muddy fingers against her cheek fondly. Again they chanted and sang the duet, lifting and falling in joy and sorrow. The moon rose, and where the mound of disturbed earth was, a willow sapling now grew. The watchers in the forest smiled and vanished. The group returned their attention to the remaining child. The officer stepped forward and picked her up, his wife stepping from the group and wrapping an arm about his waist. This is our daughter. As of old we hold the pact. As of old we raise this child to guard this land. I bind my daughter to the spirit of Sally. May she grow in the grace of the goddess. The leader and the medicine man each stepped forward and placed matching wreaths of willow branches on the child's head. Great Spirit, bless this child with laughter. Mother, hold your daughter within your heart, they murmured at the same time. The child reached a hand up to grab at the tickling leaves and giggled. The group scattered about the clearing, taking blankets and food from backpacks. Throughout the night they celebrated the new lives and mourned the loss of the eldest willow. The now empty basket became a safe bed for the child when it tired, sleeping safe beneath the willow sapling. The medicine man poked at the fallen willow trunk with his walking stick. Rotted. The tree would have fallen within the next spring rains. The druid stepped behind him, which is why she allowed herself to become the sacrifice. It was almost time for her rebirth. The old man nodded. One of the original trees, was it not? A few still remain, the ones our forefathers brought from the old country. Do you ever wonder just how confused your own ancestors must have been to watch the crazy white men bearing infants in the earth, only to have them become trees. The spirits told them you were coming and to protect you, so you could protect them. He lifted a hand to the forest. Until they could protect all of us. The druid clapped a hand on the old man's shoulder. The loophole is closed now. No one will be able to take this land and threaten the Shade Droy again. So quoth this raven.